All right, well, welcome everybody. This has been a pretty long time coming presentation, putting this together. So I'm really excited to finally be able to present on this. It's an outline on what we're going to cover today. Real basic, just go over what are ferns and where do ferns grow. There's a slide just specifically on fern vocab. And then really the meat of this presentation is on the ID of 30 of the 59 ferns that grow in Illinois from 8 different families, specifically in the Southern Illinois region. So what are ferns? So ferns are in the category of vascular plants called sporophytes. These are, so sporo, means spore. And phyte means plant. So it's a spore plant. And these spores need moisture to grow to get through their life cycle. It's called the alternation of generations. So this is when they go through from a gametophyte stage to the sporophyte stage. This is an artistic rendition of what life used to look like over in the Carboniferous period. So a long time ago, hundreds of millions of years ago, ferns were the dominant plants on Earth. So they were giant fern trees that were growing. And then once that time passed, these plants decayed and became the coal deposits that we use now. Ferns grow in all sorts of different settings. It can be found on limestone outcroppings and shear walls. Same with sandstone outcroppings. Can be found on woodlands, shaded rocky slopes, shaded rocky woodlands. Oops. Also bogs and seeps, like the royal fern here. And it can be found in inventive locations too, like little indentations in the forest, little pockets of moisture that they can find. Going over some of the fern vocab, one of the first things that you'll notice is the thumb. Thumb is in a lot of these photos, pops up all the time. But the pinna is this part here. This is all one pinna. That is one pinna there, and one there. The smaller sections of a pinna make up the pinnules. And so this would be considered one pinnule. There's one pinnule right there. There's one there too. On the backs of these pinnules are the sori. So these are the areas where all these spores are actually develop on. And so these are all of the sori right here on the margins of the marginal shield fern and on the mid vein of the log fern. The stipe, this is the section between the rachis and the base of the plant here. So this would be the stipe area right here. And then the rachis is the part in between right here. These plants can be either pinnately compound, either once, twice, 3 times. It can be even further than that as well. So this would be considered one twice pinnate. And then you see the word panatafib a lot too. So a panatafib head right here is when it doesn't quite become how it's subdivided up on the lower parts of the leaf. This is the panatafib leaf right here. This is all panatafib right here too. And then fertile fronds. Some of these plants produce 2 different types of leaves. And so these would be fertile fronds, like on the sensitive fern. We have a separate leaf that produces spores. And I've divided this into the families too. And so there's a broader explanation of what the living conditions are for the entire family too. I should mention too where I got my resources from for this presentation. So for the identification parts of this, I've used the Illustrated Flora of Southern Illinois by Molenbrock, the Vascular Flora of Illinois by Molenbrock, and also for these plant family descriptions, I used a plant systematics book and used some of the key features from those. So going into the Aspleniaceae family, this is the spleenwort family. These are plants that are terrestrial or epiphytic, growing on rocks. And the sori are found on one side of the vein. They're typically simple to 4 times pinnately compound, and generally are pretty adapted to much drier sites like cliffs. And so you can see here, all of these plants in the Aspleniaceae family and these conditions that they've evolved to live in, lots of dry, rocky habitats. And our first one from this family is the esplenium rhizophylum, or the walking fern. So rhizo, root, and phylum, so it's a root leaf. This typically likes to grow in crevices of sandstone or limestone cliffs and rocks. It's evergreen. The leaves are simple and unlobed, and they're very lance-shaped too. There's narrow sori on the undersides of the leaves. And the really interesting characteristic about this plant is that it has a rooting tip. And so that's what gives it its walking abilities. It's able to asexually reproduce from the tips of its leaves. So here's those very narrow linear sori too. And here's what those rooting tips look like. Asplenium panatafib, or the panatafib spleenwort, really likes to grow in these very similar habitat, these rocky woodlands, either on sandstone or limestone. It's cool because this is evergreen, so you can keep on finding it throughout the year. One of the fun things to do in the winter time is to go out and look at ferns, since a lot of the other stuff has gone dormant around this time. The leaves here are completely panatafib, and the petiole is brown, and the rachis is green. These sori on this are pretty elongated too. So here's some of the habitats that this likes to grow in. There's rock crevices here. This is a really, really small one. You look how wide these leaves were when it was developing. They haven't quite become so long like these ones are. So almost could be mistaken for the rhizophylum too. Really good picture of the sori on the underside of this. And then here's another picture of it growing in these rock crevices. It's amazing some of the places that this can grow. Now, anytime that we come across this symbol throughout the presentation, this means that this is a listed plant in the state of Illinois. So its habitat has in some way been affected, or it's listed as threatened or endangered. So this is Bradley spleenwort, Asplenium bradleyi, and this likes to grow in the crevices of sandstone and or cherty cliffs. Look at that spot that this one has chosen to grow. It's amazing that it's there. These are evergreen, and the leaves are bipinnate to bipinnate panatafib. So panatafib again, here we are at that panatafib. So here's where it's coming as a panatafib portion right about there. And you can see right there is also some panatafib parts. The petiole is brown throughout, but the rachis is only brown for half of its length. That's the identifying characteristic on this. So only half of its length is the rachis brown. The sori are really elongated on this too. So here's a picture of what those look like. And this was also the plant that was used in the vocabulary part of this. You can see that half black rachis there becoming green there. Sometimes when you're looking at this, you might think that it looks similar to the panatafib that we just went over too. Here's another good close-up of that half and half color rachis there. Pretty common plant. I think, anytime you hike in upland woods, you'll probably bump across this one or come across this one, Splenium platineuron, the ebony spleenwort. Likes to grow in dry or moist woodlands. It's evergreen, so you can see it throughout the year. It's always, I've gotten some really good shots of this growing through the snow too. Leaves are once pinnate, so one-time pinnately compound. And alternate, so they're alternate as opposed to one that's coming up, Splenium resiliens, which is opposite. This is alternate. And the rachis is overlapped by these pinnae, and they can grow up in up to 20 to 50 pairs. So 20 to 50 pairs of pinnae. And the rachis is purple-brown with elongated sori. Here's what those sori look like. And this is what it's looking like right now, actually. The new leaves are just emerging. So it's really starting to grow again. This one's always a really fun one to come across. The Esplenium trichomones, or the maidenhair spleenwort fern. Grows in the crevices of shaded cliffs, both limestone and sandstone. It's got evergreen characteristics to it, and the leaves are once pinnate again, so only one time pinnately compound. They are opposite across each other, but you notice that they are crenate on the margins of the leaves. So these leaves here are crenate. That's the term for that. And the petiole and rachis are both black, and the sori are elongated. Here's what those sori look like on the underside of those crenate leaf margins. I like this one. This one has really good form, I think. It's nice. And here's the one I had mentioned before, Splenium resiliens. So this is another state-listed plant, the black spleenwort. Has a pretty specific habitat too. It grows in the crevices of limestone cliffs. It's evergreen. And the leaves are once pinnately compound, and they have this bluish hue to them, and pretty triangular too. They're also opposite, and they don't overlap the rachis, like I had mentioned before with the platineuron that did overlap the rachis. The pinnae can grow into 30 up 30 pairs, and petiole and rachis are also dark brown. Here's what the underside of those leaves look like. And here's one with a lot of different pinnae, all opposite and none of them overlapping that rachis. This one really captures that bluish hue that it has too. Another part of its habitat that it requires too is some kind of body of water nearby, like moisture, so it's able to reproduce. There's me pointing at it. It's kind of hidden in the rocks there. You can see different Splenium resiliens if you look close enough. There's another one too with those really triangular pinnae. So we've just left the Aspleniaceae family, and now we're moving into the Blacknaceae family, the chain fern family. So these are terrestrial or climbing plants. And these are like on a global characteristics too. So sometimes I've been putting these tropical widespread where they occur more often throughout the world too. So we don't have very many representatives from this family. The leaves are monomorphic and dimorphic. So both two different forms of leaves that this produces. And what's unique about this family here is that the sori are produced in these little chains. So there's chains of sori along these fertile fronds that it produces. So we have the netted chain fern, the woodwardia areolata. This is our representative from the Blechtnaceae family. This grows in marshes and lowland woods and sandstone cliffs as well. I've seen this growing on the walls of cliffs before, and really large colonies too. It's kind of exciting to see. These are deciduous plants, so they die back during the year. Usually all you can see are these parts left over from the year before, and then these are all kind of shriveled up. These leaves are dimorphic, so they have two different forms. And so here's the example of one of them, and here's the other example right here. And the sterile blades are panatafib, so all one large panatafib leaf. It produces a separate fertile frond in these chains. So that's that characteristic of this whole entire family too. Some more examples. I'm fortunate to have friends that take good photos too, because going through this, I realized that a lot of the characteristics I hadn't captured with all my pictures. And so here we have these dimorphic leaves here, and that single leaf right here, that panatafib leaf. So when you see this one and it looks like this, you'll know exactly what you're looking at now. We have the hay-scented fern family. So that was our representative from that Blechtnaceae family. And now we're moving into the Densitadiaceae family, the hay-scented fern family. So just looking at it from a family perspective, the leaves are monomorphic. They have one form. They have pubescent and glabrous petioles. The sori are needle leaf margins, and these margins are recurved. So usually the sori are completely curved over by that leaf margin. So we also notice that there's a hay-scented odor that comes from these plants when they're crushed. Another one of these symbols here, another state-listed plant, the hay-scented fern. Then stadia puncta lobula. It grows in moist shaded sandstone ravines. So this is usually found in between, in a deep ravine. It gets a lot of water. These are deciduous plants, and they're bipinnate, panatafib. So once, twice, and then also panatafib. It has this sweet hay-scented odor to it too. So it's a good giveaway on that one. And the sori are marginal on this, just like the characteristic for the family. The tooth of the leaf margin is also recurved. So here's another more close-up photo of that. You can see the growth from the previous year as well. And the other one from this family is Pteridium aquilinum, the bracken fern. Really common. I noticed when I went up to Minnesota over the summer. This was growing all over the place. The habitat around here is open woodlands and fields. It's not as common around here, it doesn't seem, as it was up north. This is deciduous plant, so it's going to die back each year. Those leaves are bipinnately compound, so once and twice again. These blades are triangular, so look at how wide triangular these leaves are here. And the sori are also marginal on that, so they're going to occur right on the leaf margins of that. But this is kind of the giveaway here, that triangular shape that you see. And then a little bit closer view of those two. And in some cases, I just simply don't have the diagnostic photograph of what was described. Okay, so now we're moving into the Pteridiaceae family, the shield fern family, or otherwise the wood fern family too. That's another name for it. So these are terrestrial or epiphytic plants. They have monomorphic leaves, and these are typically 1 to 5 times pinnate. They have petioles with scales. These scales are always present at the base. So down at the bottom of the plants, there'll be scales. And then the sori are typically round. This is where a lot of the species that we're going to cover, this is the family that a lot of these are in. Our first one is the lady fern, Ethereum felix femina. This grows in open woodlands and the borders of swamps, rocky outcroppings. It's pretty wide habitat range. These are deciduous plants that are bipinnately compound. Once and twice again. The pinnules are shallowly lobed to serrate. So the pinnules, and we have a closer photo coming up, you'll be able to see those serrations on the margins of those pinnules. And the sori are elongated on this. But really the good giveaway on this one is that it's got a red, pretty reddish brown rachis there. So very red coloration that doesn't usually show up on any of the other plants. There's those serrations on those margins there. And that red coloration too. So it really captures that coloration. And then we have the sori on the underside of this, really long and narrow. Cystopteris protrusa, the fragile fern. This is coming up right now, actually. If you start hiking around in the woods, this is probably a similar scene that you'll start to notice. This is a deciduous plant, so it dies back pretty quick. And this grows in moist woodlands. These leaves are bipanatafib, and top pinnae are deeply lobed. The sori are round and the petiole is brown. Here's its chosen habitat here. Oh, and look, there's some saxifraga right in the foreground there. This was growing off the side of a rock there, and you can see right here all these little fertile fronds coming up. Must have been taken in Hardin County. Here's a whole hillside covered in Cystopteris protrusa. You can see all in the bottom here. There's all sorts of little Cystopteris. The Peria acrosticoides. Oides, like the acrosticoides. Silvery spleenwort. This is the this grows in rich woodlands. It's a deciduous plant. The leaves are pinnate and panatafib. The pinnae, long and tapering. And the sori are elongate. But really the good giveaway on this one is the hair all over it. It's very, very hairy. Here's a nice photo of what these sori look like on the underside. Some good photos from Travis. And here's a more close-up view of that photo that was just shown a minute ago. All these hairs on it. And one that seems to always grow alongside this is our next upcoming one, this Diplasium pycnocarpon. The glade fern. This is or the narrow-leaved spleenwort. This grows in moist, shaded woodlands. It's also deciduous. Has dimorphic leaves, and they're once pinnate with up to 40 pinnae. So once pinnately compound. The pinnae are entire, and the fertile fronds are very narrow. Here's what those narrow fertile fronds look like. So being dimorphic, it's going to be producing those two different types of leaves again. Really cool picture that was taken alongside the Ohio River here, with it growing, looks like in the springtime, because we got some celandine poppy growing there. Just growing in a nice clump there. And here's what these narrow fertile fronds look like. The leaves are all really contained, and compared to these sterile fronds that it produces. This one's a pretty exciting one to see. I don't see this one too often. It's Diopterus carthusiana, the spinulose wood fern. It grows in moist rocky woodlands. It's an evergreen that has bipinnate to tripinnately compound leaves. But look at how lacy this looks. It has a very lacy appearance to it, even from afar. Almost looks blurry from afar. And the sora are round on the back of the pinnae. Here's a closer shot of this too. And then this one is kind of from a distance. You can see it just takes on this really interesting look compared to this marginal shield fern compared to that. The log fern. This is the Diopterus salsa. Pretty specific habitat growing in swamps. It's like an evergreen, and the leaves are bipinnate, alternate. So once and twice, and then they're alternate. So you can see that they are not opposite each other. They have crenate margins. I know we talked about crenate margins when we were talking about splenium trichomones. So these are the crenate margins of the Diopterus salsa. But the interesting characteristic of this one is that the sora are near the midvein. That's the diagnostic feature for you. So see, they are going right along that midvein there. So if you see them alternate and along that, and you're in a swamp, you're probably looking at log fern. As opposed to Diopterus marginalis, this is the marginal shield fern, which it's got its name from the placement of its sori. These are along the margins of the pinnae. And these are evergreen plants, bipinnate to bipinnate panatafib. So getting to that panatafib head again. Kind of shallow toothed margins, but the identifying characteristic of this one is the placement of those sori. So here's where they are. Look right along the margins. They're not along the vein like they were on that log fern that we looked at. Common scene that you'll see hiking around. It's probably safe to say that if you're hiking around in woods around here, you'll bump into this on most of the hikes that you go on. It's a good one to get an eye for. Ooh, Diopterus goldiena. This was a fun one. I remember when I saw this, we were a really large patch of French shooting star, and then there's also a whole bunch of valeriana too that we were looking at. So that was a fun day, and then we ended up bumping into this too. So that was a fun day, because I don't see this one very often. It grows in these moist shaded woods. It's a deciduous plant. The leaves are pinnate to panatafid to bipinnate panatafid. So they can take on this bipinnate panatafid, but it just means that it's ending with a panatafid tip there. The leaves are shallowly toothed, and like that log fern again, these are near the midvein. So these sora are going to be growing near that midvein again. And I guess if you don't bump into any marginal shield fern, then you definitely will bump into the Christmas fern on some of your hikes, the ballisticum acrosticoides, or ballisticum acrosticoides. This grows in woodlands or rocky soil. It's evergreen, so you'll be able to see it throughout the entire year. Leaves are once pinnately compound. Pinnae are lanceolate with up to 30 pinnae, and or pinna. And the identifying characteristic on this one, though, is this really large auricle, a very large auricle. And so I hadn't mentioned that term before, but this little section right here, these little lobes here, those are known as auricles. Get a little zoom up on that. There they are there. And this is what the sori look like on the underside of the leaves. And it's usually just a few of the leaves up at the tops here are going to have those sori on them. This is just a flip of the same leaf here. Woodsia obtusa, a common woodsia. It's kind of just like this nondescript plant that it seems like it just randomly occurs sometimes, but it grows in these drier, moist, rocky woods, and also these dry, exposed sandstones. This one seems like it's just this unknown. It's like the unknown relative or something. So it's a deciduous plant. These leaves are bipinnate to bipinnate panatafib. So once and twice, and then it has a panatafib top there. And it can have up to 20 pairs of pinnae. So it can grow quite a few pairs of pinnae. They're very rounded too. They kind of have like this rounded appearance to them. And I skipped a word there, but the word was chaffy, and these are kind of chaffy plants to the touch. They typically grow in these pretty dry sites, and they do have a kind of a sandpapery feel to them. Here's what the underside of the leaves look like, looking at those very, very small sori on the underside there. Oh, and then moving into a pretty exciting family. This is a fun one, the Hymenophyllaceae family, or the filmy fern family. So we have two representatives. No, we're going to cover one of them, but I put both of them onto the slide here. So we have the weft fern here, Crepidomanes intricatum, and then we have this filmy fern here, where the family gets its name from. These really grow in very specific locations in dark crevices. They're pretty hard to find. And here's a replication of an old paper that was written, and there's me and Chris, and then the author of that was an Evers paper. So we'll start off with the filmy fern, Vandembaschiana baschiana, or Trichomonas baschianum. And the interesting thing about this, and you'll notice it from the picture, is that it is gets its name because it's very thin. It's like a film, and you can see through it, so it's translucent. Typically likes to grow beneath moist, overhanging sandstone cliffs. It's a pretty specific habitat, and not much sunlight is making it into those areas. It's one cell thick, and the leaves are bipanatafid. The pinnules are obtusely lobed, and the sori on the margin. So I have a zoom up of this. Also note that it has a winged petiole too. So this petiole here is all winged. And I guess I'm using the term petiole and rachis interchangeably. Looks like it's a huge overhang, but these are pretty small plants. So this just appears to be a huge replication, but imagine if ferns did grow that big. Wow. These are the types of areas that it likes to grow in, though. Very secluded areas. Not much sunlight makes it to them. A panoramic shot of the type of area that this would typically grow in, all the way underneath a sandstone outcropping. So usually when you're looking for this, crouched over to avoid bumping your head. And here's what those sori look like. They're totally different from what we've been looking at before. They're all the way on the tips of the leaves there. So that's a really interesting, very interesting sori. And very lacy appearance too. So those were the two representatives, and we only went over one of them from that family, the filmy fern family. So we don't have very many representatives in the, from that family. Moving on to the Inoculus family, or the sensitive fern family. These are terrestrial plants that grow in either wet or seasonally wet habitats. Typically dimorphic leaves with panatafib to 1 times pinnate panatafib leaves. So all panatafib, that's one large panatafib leaf. These really occur mostly in these northern temperate regions. Our representative here is the Inoculus sensibilis, the sensitive fern. It grows in moist woodlands and open grounds. This is pretty common fern to see. It's deciduous and perennial and has these dimorphic leaves. It has those one fertile frond that it puts up. That'll be coming up in the next slide. And that sterile blade is all panatafid. So this is one large panatafid leaf. The winged rachis there. And there's what that fertile frond looks like. So you will see these in the wintertime, and you'll know that sensitive fern had been around. And you'll probably see some of these too, shriveled up nearby. But pretty common plant in lowland woods. You'll notice that one a lot. There's what a large population of the sensitive ferns are looking like. Looks like they were just growing. This must have been another spring photo here where they were still expanding. And we're off to the Osmondaceae family, the Osmonds. These are the royal fern family. Terrestrial plants growing with branch stems that completely or partially dimorphic. So having 2 different forms. Osmunda is the only genus in North America, though. So this is the genus that we got. And this one typically grows in swamps and lowland forests. There's a really large population here down in the seeps, looking at the royal fern here. So here's the royal fern, the Osmunda spectabilis. Grows in swamps and seeps, woods, and some of the southern counties. It also grows in these sandstone ledges too. It's deciduous, stands erect, so it's a really tall plant. It's up to the mid-thigh sometimes, even taller. They're bipinnate with up to 2 to 8 pairs of pinnae. So bipinnately compound again, once and twice, with up to 21 pinnules. Wow. So we'll look at some photos here. Oh, and to mention also, the sori are on the upper parts of the leaves. So you'll notice that the leaves become much narrower as the sori are developing on the tops of it. So here's what that looks like. We have much narrower leaves where all the sori are, and the sterile parts of the leaves here, very tall and branching. There's that same photo that we used for the introduction to the family. This is a large population of royal fern. But yeah, the branching of this and the size of these are kind of what help identify that one. The Polypody family, the Polypodiaceae. These are the epiphytic plants. And now we're back to plants that like to grow on rocks again. So it's kind of like we've left the woods and now we're going back to the rocks. And these ones have round sori, kind of uncommonly have divided leaves, more common through the tropics and temperate areas, with a few in the temperate areas, I'm sorry. So our first representative is Cleopeltus polypodioides. So it's like a polypode. That's the resurrection fern. The habitat for this is on sandstone rocks and tree trunks and branches. It's just taking on that epiphytic characteristic. But this is usually the state that these are in when you see them. They're so shriveled up. Barely, it looks like they're clinging to life on the sides of rocks here. And you can see those round sori that we had mentioned in the characteristics of the family. These are evergreen plants. So these are panatafib, glabrous and gray beneath. So you can see that gray coloration beneath. And those round sori. So sort of expanded with that kind of two-colored look to it, where you have gray coloration below and much darker coloration above. And then here's sometimes what it looks like too, just dry as all get out. The other one we got is Polypodium virginianum, the common polypody fern. This grows in sandstone rocks. It's evergreen. You can see it all the time. And the leaves are panatafib, so one large panatafib leaf. Look at this, you can actually see the sori beneath that developing. They're actually on the underside of that leaf though. And then the sori are round and on the back there. Here's what they look like on the underside there. Very symmetric looking too. Another photo of with the round sori here. And growing right off the side of a rock again too. So you'll see this one quite a bit when you're out hiking through rocky woods. These will be growing right out of the sides of the rocks. Looks like we have some palea in the background of that too. Another picture of what it looks like growing in the sides of rocks there, right in the rocky woods. Some Christmas fern in the background there. So we've left the Polypodiaceae family. Now we're headed into the Pteridiaceae family, the maidenhair family. It's actually, I think, the last family we're covering today too. So on a family level, these are terrestrial and/or epiphytic plants. If marginal sori, so the sori in this whole family are on the margins of the leaves. Monomorphic and dimorphic leaves, and simple up to 6 times pinnately compound for some examples. We don't have any examples in Illinois that are 6 times pinnately compound, but this family can produce plants that produces plants that do have that. And the first one we'll start with is Adianum pedatum, the maidenhair fern. These occur in moist and shaded woodlands. It's deciduous, so they die back each year. Right now, they're all still pretty died back. You can still identify them. And the reason you can is because this is the giveaway for this one, is that it's pedately compound. It has a really interesting way or form that it grows. It's forked. It has a black petiole. Look at a black petiole there. And the sori are marginal and hidden by the reflexed leaf margin. So there's that interesting form. So when you see that kind of form there, you know, we had seen the bracken fern that may be similar looking to that. You may confuse that with that. Bracken fern was much more triangular. So has more of a rounded appearance to it as well. And then these pinnules too are very, very crenately margined. And the sori are going to be on the edges or margins of these leaves here. I don't believe I have any photos of the sori. It's a really large population of them. There's more Christmas fern again. So you can't go anywhere hiking without seeing it. Cheilanthes lanosa, the hairy lip fern. It grows in really, really dry, exposed cliffs. This is the preferred habitat of this one. Evergreen. The leaves are bipinnate to panatafib. The petiole and rachis are both brown. And the sori are marginal and hidden by the reflexed leaf margin. So hidden sori that are behind the leaf margin. So there they are. All along that margin there. That's what it looks like there too. Kind of just has a dried out appearance to it, but these are much more, they're pretty rounded too. You can see though, they look like they are, you can see them kind of curving over those margins there. And then sticking with the cheilanthes, we have the Cheilanthes fii, the baby lip fern. So if you're seeing this one, then you are probably on a really, really steep, dry, exposed limestone cliff. And you might be asking yourself, how did I even get here? These are evergreen. Oops. The leaves are bipinnate to panatafid to tripinnate, but they're densely woolly. Look how woolly this is. They live in really, really kind of harsh environments. So they put on a coat so that they can stay warm. And the sori are marginal, hidden by the reflexed leaf margins again, and have quite a bit of drought tolerance too. Here's what it's completely covered in sori, and then look how hairy these are. And seeing the habitats that these like to live in, just growing right off the sides of these turdy limestone cliffs here. Whole bunch of Cheilanthes fii. We got Pellia atropurpurea, the purple cliff break fern. Another plant that likes to hang out on limestone cliffs, and it's evergreen. So you can see it throughout the whole year. It's pinnate to tripinnately compound. The pinnules are lanceolate. So look at these lanceolate pinnules here. Pretty widely spaced too. It also has a purplish rachis, purple-ish. But the identifying characteristic on this is the marginal sori. They're all along the edges of this. Let's see, all these sori hanging out right on the edges. Just like the Cheilanthes fii, I see this when I was seeing Cheilanthes fii, I was also seeing a lot of this, along with a lot of the splenium resiliens too, that black spleen wort. They're kind of associates with each other. Another photo of the conditions that this one likes to grow in, the habitat that it likes. Then we have Phegopteris hexagonoptera, the broad beach fern. This is a deciduous woods. It's got triangular leaves. Good characteristic here that these two point right down. That's the characteristic. You notice that on the sensitive fern, these were also pointing right downward, but these are not. These are much more panatafib too. The winged rachis. And the sora are round and small on the back of the leaves. But this is the helpful identifying characteristic of this. These pointing downwards. Sometimes the really large populations of this. This looks like it was in a pine stand too. All right, and that was all of them. Thanks a lot.